And that's where, nutrition and resilience are really connected. It's a practice. No one does anything correctly the first time. You keep practicing, and you go along that continuum. Sometimes you're going to be going forward and sometimes you're going to be going backward. And all of that is a completely human response.
You're listening to Becoming Wildly Resilient, brought to you by University of Kentucky Human Resources, Health and Wellness. In this series, we'll explore a variety of well-being topics with experts from the university community in physical, emotional, nutritional, and financial health. Join us, and together we'll discover how we can thrive at work, home, and beyond. Welcome to another episode of Becoming Wildly Resilient. I'm your host, Jakob Hester, and today I'm joined by Vanessa Oliver. Vanessa is a registered dietitian nutritionist with UK HR Health and Wellness. In this episode, we'll be discussing a whole host of nutrition-related topics, including community-supported agriculture, tips for incorporating more variety into your diet, and how nutrition and resilience are connected. Welcome to the show, Vanessa.
Thanks, Jacob.
How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Working from home, like a lot of people, I think. But yeah, doing great. How about you?
I'm doing well. Welcome to my digital studio, I guess.
Thanks.
So I'm going to throw a new question in here that I haven't asked any of my previous guests. What's one way you've been taking care of yourself during the pandemic?
I have found that I really like baking biscotti. And so that's taking care of myself and my husband. And I've learned that I would not mind having some sort of business in an alternate, universe where I'd be able to do that full time. I don't know. There's something really fun about doing that. Other than baking lots of cookies, I have been trying to sort of set one task for myself every day. It doesn't matter how big or small it is, but it can just be something, like menial, like housework, folding laundry, sweeping a floor, or knitting something, or going, around the neighborhood. That's just sort of been helping me kind of shape my days. And running. I've been doing a lot of running.
Yeah, I was curious how the running was going. I know you were pretty avid in that, and we've heard kind of anecdotally about how people have had a tough time getting into some things, and then there's other people who have found that as a new hobby where they've had a little more time and that sort of thing. So it's been kind of interesting how people have approached it.
Yeah, I was lucky in that it was a regular habit for me before. So it's something that I definitely look forward to now because it's really the only time I get out of the house other than the grocery store. Like those kind people, at Trader Joe's who are like, what else have you got going on today? And I'm like, this is the highlight, lady. This is all I got.
What constitutes like a vacation these days is kind of different. Like going to the grocery feels like a big feat these days. But yeah, something I've actually been doing. I've kind of gone into the intellectual domain a little bit more, and over the last, say, like month and a half, probably, I've actually been using Duolingo to practice and relearn German again. So I spend like 15 minutes a day doing that. And that's kind of something that's stimulating for me and keeps me off, like Twitter or something like that. Something that is kind of gives my brain something different to do too. So that's been kind of a interesting self-care tactic for me, I think.
Yeah, that's funny. Greg and I were talking about how we keep hearing ads for Duolingo on public radio, and we were just wondering if that's been a big hobby for a lot of people during this time. And so I guess you're N of one. Yes, we can say that it is.
I also have to give a quick shout out to your husband, Dr. Greg, as well. I know he's a regular listener of the podcast, and he hosts Dr. Greg Davis on Medicine on the local NPR station WKY. So I'll give my first shout out on the show to him. So thanks for listening.
He is going to be so pleased. I can see his little face light up when he listens to that.
Yeah, so that kind of leads into the kind of my standard opener as well. So tell a little more about yourself and the work that you do.
Sure. So I am a registered dietitian with UK Health and Wellness, and with Karen Bryla McNeese, who was on your podcast a couple episodes ago. We are in charge of providing the nutrition programming for health and wellness. So that looks like weekly classes. It looks like, in other times, it looks like in-person consults, or we also do phone or email consults for any sort of nutrition questions that someone might have. In the past, we've also offered cooking classes, culinary workshops, snack cart where we literally drive a golf cart around campus full of snacks.
I've been on those, yeah.
Gosh, we do a lot of really neat programming, and that's a really fun aspect of our job in that it rarely is the same from day to day. So it's different than what a lot of other dietitians can say about their job, especially if you're talking to someone who's like a clinical dietitian who works in a hospital or in a nursing home. They're going to have much more of a structured day-to-day. We do not have that structured day-to-day, and I think Karen and I both really enjoy that and value that about our job with UK Health and Wellness.
Yeah, I know Karen and I talked about this as well, about how dietitians get a bad rap too. And you guys are like so far opposite from what the like sort of stereotypical look at a dietitian is. So
I know. Sometimes, we'll have someone leave a consult or appointment and be like, "You were way nicer than I thought you would be." It's like, thank you.
So I know something else you and Karen are actually working on, or trying to become certified intuitive eating counselors. Can you talk about what intuitive eating is and how that fits into sort of the Eat Well ethos?
Yeah, so intuitive eating is a self-care eating framework. Its aim is to help people make peace with food. And what that means is creating a healthy relationship between eating and your mind and your body. So essentially, it's a practice of responding to your internal bodily cues for hunger and fullness instead of other external factors. It doesn't mean that you eat perfectly, whatever that means, all the time, but it does mean that your relationship with food takes up less emotional and mental energy. And we've really seen, in our practice at UK, that diet culture can really wreak a little bit of havoc, right? There's a lot of confusion and shame and anxiety around food in the world. And what we try to do is provide kind of a safe place for members to explore new information and ways of thinking. And intuitive eating is a really great framework for us to do that.
It feels like it breaks down that all or nothing mentality that sometimes you get, particularly with something like nutrition. And so you mentioned not eating perfectly and having a better relationship with your food. And you mentioned self-care in there. So I thought it was really important to bring that up because I know that's something you all have been working on. And it's a really interesting framework and something that fit really well into what you all were doing as well. So it's pretty cool to hear about and hear you kind of explain it in your own words as well.
Yeah. And I think too, since it's all about that internal relationship within yourself, I mean, so many times with nutrition, you'll see these blanket recommendations that don't take into account any personal need that your patient or client might have. And our approach at Eat Well has always been about the individual needs. So working with intuitive eating, which is defined by those individual needs, it made so much sense to us. And so we're really excited to be going through this training to become certified intuitive eating counselors and figuring out how we're going to really be able to use this even more in our practice. We are all about meeting people where they are. We want people to create their own path to progress, not worrying about these rules to follow or feel guilty about breaking. And so really incorporating all of these in a more formal way in our program is very exciting to us.
Yeah, I think this is a good point to connect the dots between something like nutrition, which is kind of typically hangs around in that sort of physical health domain or dimension of well-being, but how it's actually connected to some of these other areas of our well-being and sort of that bigger picture, or how it's connected to sort of that mental and emotional area that we typically talk about on the podcast, which is related to resilience. So how are nutrition and resilience really connected, and why is that important?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I think it's something that does come up quite a lot with us. I think if listeners want to think about like how to think about nutrition in a resilience framework, one way is to really consider their level of self-compassion. I think in a lot of ways there's this very sort of old school notion that you need to beat yourself up in order to make a health change, like be your own drill sergeant or pay someone else to be a drill sergeant for you. You know, like if you're not being hard on yourselves, you're not going to be able to, blank, insert your goal. But research actually supports that we're going to be more successful and have more motivation in the long run if we're kinder to ourselves. And so I think like listeners could consider practicing maybe a little bit more self-compassion, a little bit more kindness, some positive self-talk. If you're feeling like a failure or inadequate in some way, not eating perfectly, quote unquote. And that's where, nutrition and resilience are really connected. It's a practice. No one does anything correctly the first time. You keep practicing, and you go along that continuum. Sometimes you're going to be going forward and sometimes you're going to be going backward. And all of that is a completely human response.
Yeah, and that kind of forwards and backwards movement is resilience too. When you go backwards, how do you turn around and get going forwards again? That's sort of the definition of resilience, is your ability to bounce back when you face some sort of adversity of any sort, whether that be nutrition or whether that be something else in your life. So I think there is a pretty kind of clear connection between these. And like, what are some things that listeners can consider or try that combine our need to eat and resilience practices like mindfulness?
Yeah, I think sort of greeting that adversity that might come up, not suppressing any sort of negative emotion that might be associated with maybe not changing as fast as you want to, for example, because, the struggle is definitely real and human, like I said. Lots of times if you look at, say, nutrition influencers on social media, for example, they might make it seem like there's this one true way to eat correctly. And that's just not true. So that would be one thing to do, just sort of pay attention to what's coming from within instead of relying on those external factors. And also trying to be less rigid and trying not to get sucked into that need for needing a drill sergeant or following those rules. Diet culture has a lot of rules about what and when and why and how to eat. It's pathologized hunger as well as eating to satiety. So I think that inviting yourself to sort of tune into and recognize and listen to your cues of hunger or cues of fullness are such an important part of nourishing your body. And nourishment is such a chief aspect of self-care. I mean, it's like, is it the bottom part of the hierarchy of needs? It's, so, and we know that practicing self-care is such a necessary, like you said, piece of resiliency. So those are some things that listeners can consider when they're looking to be more mindful, and also just creating an environment where it's pleasant to cook or prepare food or to eat it. Really paying attention to sights and smells and sounds and textures and tastes of your food. A lot of times we don't do that. We eat in a very distracted way. So practicing a little bit more mindfulness in that capacity can also be helpful.
Yeah, I actually have two examples that come to mind, that things that I've done in the past that I thought were really, really helpful when it comes to connecting something like nutrition and the idea of mindfulness, not just being sort of mindfully aware, but also like as an actual practice. So the first one kind of just being sort of mindfully aware and not just mindlessly eating. I remember sitting in a class one time and we had a guest speaker come in and they gave us all like one of those really mini like chocolate bars, like a Hershey Kiss type of thing where it was like a single one. And I looked at it and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like, I've got a sweet tooth. this is not going to be satisfying. It's like, I'm going to need about 4 more of those. And so the practice was then to take really small bites and to really kind of notice and savor every one of those bites, and to kind of slow down and really get in tune with what you're eating and how it tastes and how it smells and those types of things. And by the time I finished with that little tiny piece of candy, I realized, oh, that kind of did scratch the itch that I had. I actually don't need any more of those right now. Yes, I might want a few more, but I didn't feel the need that I wanted anymore. And so my brain kind of flipped in the process, which I thought was kind of interesting. And it was really eye-opening to me about just kind of sitting there, like thinking about sitting on the couch and eating chips during a TV show or something, where you're just kind of slowly shoveling it in. And by the time you realize that you've eaten like 3/4 of a bag of chips. And I mean, you cut yourself a little slack when it happens, because everybody's done it at some point. But you try not to do those things.
Yeah, that's such a classic technique. We see that a lot with like the Hershey Kiss, or a piece of chocolate or some raisins or something like that, where you just invite yourself to really experience a small bite of food. I mean, so many times we do eat without thinking about it. So it's a really sort of neat practice to reintroduce yourself to all of those sensory experiences.
And I think the other example that I have, as far as like turning it into an actual practice, I think you'll appreciate this one, is related to coffee, actually. So a couple of years ago.
Do you like coffee, Jacob?
Yeah, no. We pretty much talk to each other at least once a week about coffee. I actually sent Vanessa a photo yesterday of all the like different styles of beans that I currently have. I'm basically opening up a coffee shop out of my house soon, I think. So you can provide the biscottis and I'll provide the coffee, and we'll have a nice little side business venture we got going. But
yes,
I actually ditched like the Keurig and like the coffee machine and all that a couple of years ago, and bought basically doing slow pour with a Chemex. And it obviously takes more time. It takes a little more focus. It has some steps to it. And there's a lot of nuance in kind of when you're pouring the water, how hot it is, those types of things. So there's a lot of detail to it that you miss when you do something like a Keurig. And so I intentionally started using that as kind of a 10-minute practice every day of being really focused in on what I'm doing and taking in the moment that I have with that coffee as I'm pouring the spirals around, or as I'm doing zigzags. I'm watching the coffee rise. I'm watching it bloom. I'm smelling it as the water's kind of hitting it, and really being in tune with that practice. And it kind of sounds like a really weird example of mindfulness, because you think about sitting on a pillow with your eyes closed in complete silence and that type of thing. But this is sort of in practice. My lights are on, I'm standing, my eyes are open, obviously, but it's a way for me to kind of get in tune and just really be a little more grounded too. And I look forward to that every day, that sort of, 10 minutes or whatever it takes from sort of start to finish. And I haven't looked back. I don't miss having like a Keurig or something like that, because it gives me that opportunity to slow down.
Yeah, I was going to ask actually if you do miss having that quick sort of, hit of caffeine, but I think that's a really important sort of statement, because so many times people think they create these barriers to mindfulness because they think it's got to be like in a spa or a yoga studio or, sitting, in a quiet room, but finding those mindfulness practices in the everyday, whether it's making coffee or eating a small wrapped piece of chocolate or going for a walk around your neighborhood, I don't know, mopping the floor, there are lots of ways that you maybe unseen ways as of yet that you can practice that mindfulness. And then it really can just sort of seep into a lot of other aspects of your life.
Yeah. I try to do that with like chopping vegetables and stuff like that now too.
For sure. Yeah, that's a hard transition for someone who has a restaurant history, because there's not a lot of room for mindfulness when you're doing dinner prep sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's a good thing to think about too, just in your kind of general life as well, with all those moments where you sort of are always on the go and trying to find opportunities to slow down and enjoy some of those things as well. Obviously, you're going to have times where you're not going to be able to do that, but trying to carve out a little bit of that time every day for yourself to be able to enjoy something, whatever that is, whether that's in the kitchen or whether that's sitting on a pillow and actually meditating or anything like that, sort of finding that time for you.
Exactly.
So kind of hopping sort of further into the nutrition world, I think a phrase that we often hear related to nutrition and kind of healthy eating and that sort of thing is to eat local, which to me seems, pretty self-explanatory. But I kind of wonder, is it actually that simple? So can you explain what local actually is, and then what local eating actually entails?
Ooh, okay. So eating local can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I think that it's really valuable to self-define depending on what your value system is, like what resonates the most with you. But there are definitely some benefits to consider. And there's economic benefits to eating local, definitely. You're keeping money in your local food economy because money that you spend on local food goes to, your neighbors, really, as opposed to absentee-owned corporate businesses. Spending money locally can also have a multiplier effect because those neighbors that you're giving your money to are going to be more likely to reinvest their money back into the local economy. And then, of course, supporting local food and farm-related businesses not only increases farm income, but it also increases jobs for your neighbors, right? And so all of that contributes to a more vibrant local economy. So if those economic benefits are important to you, then that can be something that helps define your idea of eating local, because then you might be a little bit more hyper local. There are health and social benefits, obviously. Produce that travels shorter distances from the farm to your table is thought to retain more nutrients. It definitely retains more freshness and flavor. That's always a good tip, especially if you've experienced veggies that you're not really sure that you like. Maybe you just haven't had a good one, Food consumption is such a huge part of our cultural identity, too. And I think that anytime that you can deepen a relationship between yourself and a farmer or yourself and a food producer is going to help build a very vibrant sort of local food economy, or there's probably a better word for that, but that's going to be a social benefit as well. And then there's, environmental benefits, if that's important to you. That also might be something that'll help you define what local food is. We, especially here in Kentucky, farmland is such an important economic asset, and we want to preserve that productive farmland so we can maintain that beautiful rural landscape that we drive into when we drive into the bluegrass, right? We also know that buying local can help reduce waste. I have a statistic that approximately 41% of U.S. food waste goes to landfills. So instead of taking up space in a landfill, the nutrients in wasted food could be composted, for example, and used for a variety of purposes, including local food production. So I guess the too long didn't read version of all of that for eating local is you are buying the freshest, most nutritious food possible, right? You're keeping your dollars close to home. You're helping Kentucky families earn a living, and you're also reducing the miles that the food has to travel from the farm to your plate. I mean, that's enough.
Yeah, I mean, it sounded like a very simple question, but you really hear the benefits of that. You heard them like as a consumer, you heard them as the local economy, and then you heard them from a sustainability aspect as well. So
absolutely.
I kind of assumed that might have been sort of a simple question with a more complex answer. And I kind of, even as I thought about the question, I was thinking like what local means to me. And I kind of came up with two examples that it's like, which one of these is actually better? A local mom and pop restaurant that's not serving local food versus maybe a chain type of restaurant that's serving locally sourced food. And so then my brain was like, oh man, now I really got to try to figure out like what eating local is and what that means to me. So you actually kind of answered that, I think, a little bit with your value system and defining what local is for you with the things that you care about. So I actually was not expecting that answer. So that was really interesting to kind of rectify that in my brain before I had to ask it.
Excellent.
So we've also heard kind of around Kentucky in general with the Kentucky Proud. I think that's a really big initiative with sort of that eat local vibe to it. And I think that's beyond just food systems. But how have you seen this grow within the University of Kentucky campus in recent years as well?
I think that it's just there's a lot more awareness about eating locally. I've been working at UK now for 8 years, and I've been in Lexington for longer than that. But when I first started working at UK in my current position, I kind of had to explain, more like, for example, what a CSA is. And I know we're going to talk about that soon, or what a farmer's market is, or, those sorts of things. And now I do not have to explain it. People are asking me, like, where can I get local food? What is your favorite farm? What are the hours of the farmer's market? And so I think just that awareness, but also there's a sort of sense of pride that goes along with it. People know that we have a really robust local food economy here in Kentucky, and especially in the Bluegrass region. And people get excited about that. And honestly, just in the last year or two, there are so many local food blogs. There are so many restaurants where their focus is supporting the local food economy. We have actual food like rock stars that are nationally known here in Kentucky. And that's all such a huge progression from when I first came here back in the mid-90s. So it's really cool to see that develop. And there's a lot more that I don't know, but those are the things that I've seen for sure.
Yeah, I've noticed, having been a student back in kind of the late 2000s now, thinking about like going to campus dining even, of like what campus dining looked like then to what it looks like now as an employee when I go in and eat. And if you go into either one of the two main locations on campus, you'll see that even within the cafeteria, there are local businesses that have little stands and shops, and sometimes they rotate them around, and some are constant stays in there. And that's really cool to me, to be able to experience some of these restaurants that I have not been to, but they're available to me, and it gives you a little bit more variety, especially an ethnic variety of food as well, which is really interesting to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I did not mention the UK dining and what the contract stipulates as far as supporting the local food economy. There's probably someone else that you can have on the podcast that would be able to speak to this piece with much more detail. But it has completely changed in the last few years. And that's been really, it's a two-way relationship, right? Because not only does UK campus get to bring these really great local or ethnic foods to the community, but once the community sees that there's a market for these foods with such a large corporate partner such as University of Kentucky, then they're going to, in good economic times, they're going to want to be able to develop more businesses that way. And for the Food Connection Kitchen at UK to be able to bring in local and national chefs to give food demonstrations, for example, and the Department of Dietetics and Human Nutrition at the university has really expanded as far as offering new educational opportunities for its students too. I mean, all of this is working together, not to mention that since we're a land-grant university, we have the wonderful College of Ag, Food and Environment, and they're always expanding their reach as far as helping to support local food systems. So we're really lucky.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The reach that we have and the number of things that we just listed off, and I'm guaranteeing you we missed something.
Oh, for sure. I apologize in advance.
So to any of those groups that we left off, it was not on purpose. There really is. I mean, there's just so many things that people can get involved in at the university. And we're talking about one specific aspect of sort of nutrition and local food and that type of thing. And we just rattled off 3 or 4 different areas where that's happening, and they've all each seen expansion over the last 4, 5, 10 years, however long you want to look at that.
Oh yeah, no. Right now, I'm envisioning one of those whiteboards with the pins and all the string. I mean, that's really what it looks like.
Yeah, so you actually mentioned CSAs in there, kind of at the beginning of that answer as well. And we sort of know that you kind of mentioned that people are getting a more of an understanding now of CSAs. And that is one way to eat local, is to purchase a CSA share in your community. So as we're recording this episode, our CSA Voucher Program has just opened up to UK employees on a health plan. And I know you're preparing for the CSA fair as well, which will occur the week before this episode actually airs. So let's talk about CSAs a little bit, since the growing season is really just around the corner. First, can you explain what community-supported agriculture is for those that may not know?
Yeah, so this really ties really well into looking at what your definition of eating local is, right? Because when you become a CSA shareholder, it's a very hyper-local relationship. Like your partner farm could be just down the road. Okay, so that's something really cool. So a CSA, or community supported agriculture, is what it stands for. It's essentially a subscription to a farm's harvest, and it's usually a weekly subscription. Basically, you're entering into an agreement with a farm to receive a delivery or receive a shipment or receive a pickup. There's lots of different methods of fresh and local and seasonal produce for the duration of our growing season. Here in the Bluegrass, it's usually from May to October, so like 20 to 22 weeks. And generally with the CSA, payment for the subscription is required upfront, or at least some portion of payment is required upfront for the entire season. And that provides the farms with some guaranteed working capital for the growing season. But, like I said, some farms will have some form of a payment plan, so you should definitely check if that's important to you. There's so many different aspects of different CSAs. It's just such a neat opportunity to, again, be able to support that local food economy, of course, but, just learn more about where your food comes from. I mean, so many people, maybe fewer now, but they just don't really think about it. I've definitely worked with all ages of people who don't really think about, where is this head of lettuce coming from? Where is this hamburger coming from? And knowing where it does come from really helps you not only perhaps increase, the health benefits of your food choices, but that can also be kind of that mindfulness practice like we were talking about earlier. So a CSA, there's so many benefits of a CSA, but just starting with that simple definition of it's a subscription. It's like a weekly food subscription.
Your original Netflix of food.
Kind of, except it's the DVD version.
You mentioned a little bit about what sort of to expect when you purchase a CSA share, and talking about like the growing season and weekly and that sort of thing. What are some other things that you can expect when you do purchase a CSA share?
You can expect a pretty wide variety of produce throughout the season. The Bluegrass is pretty blessed with having that diversity of crops that grow pretty well here. But the bulk of a typical partner farm share will consist of vegetables. There's occasional fruit, but mainly vegetables. And then some farms will have opportunities to add on other farm items like meat or eggs when available. You do have to pay extra for that. Or pantry share items like cornmeal or tomatoes or salsa. And, participants can expect to see a lot of different varieties from week to week, and especially ones that you might not see in the grocery store. Another thing to expect too as a CSA member is that you are buying into the farm. You're a shareholder. So what that means is that you're sharing in not only all of those benefits and, beautiful eggplant, but you're sharing the inherent risks of farming with the farmer. So that includes like dealing with the weather or pests or, pandemics. But it also means that you do benefit from being the farm's number one priority when it comes to enjoying their harvest. So what CSA farms are able to do is when they harvest for their CSA members first. And then they're able to sell the remainder at somewhere like a farmer's market or restaurants or something. But since you're a shareholder, you do get that premier pick.
I think an important aspect of CSAs, that personal stake that you have in it. And we've seen from research that having that sort of accountability or having that ownership of whatever you're involved in you're more likely to follow through on a lot of those things as well. And I think when we're talking about eating healthy, or eating healthier, I should say, probably, you may be more likely to follow through with that when you feel like you have that sort of personal stake in it. And I think that's an important thing to think about as well when we're talking about resilience, and not just ourselves, but I always kind of close with take care of yourself and others. And I think that's a way to take care of those in your community too, because you're talking about farms that are, somewhere between maybe 15 to, 70 miles away. So these are people from your community that you're making sure that they have the income that they need to continue to do what they do and to get you the kind of healthy, local, fresh, organic produce that you're looking for as well, so that doesn't go away.
Yeah. And you're also creating kind of a generational sort of pattern too. I mean, you're able to introduce your children or other family members to new foods. Maybe you're able to bring them to see, picking up your share, and seeing how exciting it is to see all of these bags of produce lined up and, ooh, one has your name on it, or maybe even going to the farm and being able to visit, or maybe you pick your farm share up there. So there's a lot of different opportunities to create those relationships and increase that sort of stake that you have, in these food choices.
I mentioned the voucher program as well. So maybe talk about that a little bit, about how that is connected to the CSAs and the actual specific program that we have at UK for our employees that are on a health plan.
Yeah. So this is a super cool part of my job that I'm able to work with. But the voucher program enables employees on a UK health plan, like you mentioned, up to $200 off of a share from one of the farms in our 5-farm coalition that we work with. All of these farms are local and certified organic. There's a few different share sizes available with these farms, and without a voucher, that cost can range from $450 to $880, depending on size. So this voucher really does represent some serious cost savings and helps people to really, maybe engage or expand would be a better word, those food behaviors. And we have been doing this program, is this our 6th year? Yeah, it started off with a pilot study back in 2016.
It's really unique what we do as well. You've actually received an award from the College and University Professional Association for Human Resources in 2019. And you all received that HR Innovation Award because you don't see this very much on college campuses. And I think what kind of won that award was what was found in the research that I think College of Agriculture did, correct?
Yes.
So they found that participants increased their vegetable consumption by nearly 2 servings per day. Yep. And they averaged half of a non-preventative doctor visit as well. So the initial estimates really found that for every $1 that was invested into this program, there was a return of $2.50. So that's really important kind of from a financial standpoint and thinking about our healthcare and those types of things and some of the benefits that you actually personally will receive from that, whether that be your own personal health, but also thinking about our health cost. And trying to keep the health plans low, or as low as we can keep them. And that investment, not only from the university, but just in ourselves, I think is really important to think about as we move forward and think about our health.
Yeah, we were actually the first university in the country to offer this as a health plan benefit.
Oh, wow. I actually didn't know that.
Yeah. And so it's super innovative. I mean, we were groundbreaking. It's kind of, we're setting the pace. And to do this, we do work with an organization, a local organization, Kentucky Farm Share Coalition, and they're a subsidiary of the Organic Association of Kentucky, known as OAK. And what the Kentucky Farm Share Coalition is doing now, and a lot of it is based on the research that you just mentioned. They're able to work with a lot of other local corporations in order to introduce this workplace voucher system. So that research has really been important to expand, that local food economy. You know what I mean? So it's just, it's another example of just, how things have been able to change starting on campus, and then it's just sort of spreading out throughout the state. And yeah, the research points that came out of it, I mean, decrease in annual doctor's visits, decrease in pharmacy expenditures. I mean, it's nice to get that very quantitative ROI, coming from the workplace perspective. But we've also seen how it helps people feel like just more valued as an employee, and you cannot put a dollar amount on that,
exactly.
And people feel an increase in perceived health. They feel healthier. You can't put a dollar amount on that. So yeah, I mean, it's super exciting, like I said, to be a part of this program.
It's really interesting. I actually had no idea that we were the first college that did that. I think I've taken it for granted. I mean, obviously I work in the department, I work with you, and I didn't even know that. I knew that we were on the cutting edge of it, but I had no idea that we were like the first one. So that's actually really cool. It's something I learned.
We are innovators.
Learned new today. Yeah.
Yep.
We talked about the benefits a little bit. I actually want to dive a little bit into the sort of challenges and barriers, not around just CSAs in general, but kind of going a little broader and thinking about nutrition as well. Yeah. But kind of a moment of vulnerability for me, I think. I have done the CSA in the past. I've done a similar one out in the community as well. And so I have, they varied in how they function, but I kind of had two sort of takeaways for me of things that were sort of challenges or barriers, what have you. But growing up, I was an extremely picky eater.
Oh, really?
And it really was not until I was probably mid-20s-ish.
Which was yesterday.
Yeah, right. I'll give my wife some credit on this one because she's definitely the one that has forced me out of that comfort zone a little bit. But really, it probably was my mid to late 20s before I really, really started branching out and having that willingness to try more things as well. But a CSA was a really great opportunity to do that. But what I found for me is that I kind of struggled to incorporate some of the new foods, particularly the ones that you don't know about as well. Like obviously everybody knows, green beans or corn or something like that. But your things like kohlrabi that are a little different that you may never have used or even seen or heard of or anything like that. So there were times where I was a little intimidated in using those and how to actually incorporate those in or how to store them or anything like that. So that was kind of one barrier that I had that I kind of found between the two times that I've done this. And then the other kind of branch off of that was going into food waste. And you sort of mentioned this earlier, but it was not only because I was afraid or didn't know how to use it or what have you. There was also the amount of food that you actually get from these CSAs. So this is actually, it's sort of a selling point as well, that it sounds like a lot because you're paying for it up front or whatever. But even without the discount, the amount of food you get and the quality of produce that you get is really, really good. But when you're getting it weekly like that, for me, it was actually kind of tough to figure out how to incorporate it. It's like you pretty much had no choice but to increase your vegetable consumption because of that. So that kind of, yeah. So there were sort of those two things or something that I had. So let's kind of break them down a little bit. So what are some tips that you have for folks that are like me that are willing, but may struggle to incorporate those newer, healthier foods or maybe intimidated by those sort of lesser known or used produce items like the kohlrabis that you may get in a CSA?
Yeah. Well, this is definitely something that comes up, whether you're working with a CSA or just incorporating new foods in general. If you do identify as someone who's maybe risk averse or just has a limited palate for whatever reason, the first thing is not to expect a miracle right away. You got to give yourself some time to kind of adjust. And again, increasing your positive self-talk when it comes to trying new foods can be really helpful there. But certainly some good strategies would be to mix what you already like with something new, So if you like bacon, try some kale with some bacon, or if you like a good bowl of pasta, then add, a new vegetable to your pasta. It's not necessarily, I'm not talking about hiding a vegetable in a food because I'm not a huge fan of that. But definitely keeping it in the same dish or on the same plate, that can be helpful. Trying different versions of a food or different preparations of a food. Lots of times I'll talk to clients who swear to me up and down that they hate all vegetables, right? But it may turn out that they've only had vegetables that have been boiled within an inch of their lives, and they were 6 at the time and they haven't tried it since then. So give yourself a little bit of a chance to maybe try something new. If you don't like a boiled vegetable, maybe try a roasted vegetable. Roasting vegetables is usually a game changer for a lot of people because things have texture and they get crisp, and you can put oil and lots of yummy, salt and pepper, other spices on there, and it's going to be a completely different taste than that boiled vegetable. Or maybe you don't like green bell peppers, so you've sworn off all peppers, but turns out you really like orange ones, So giving yourself a little bit of that sort of exploration kind of mindset can be really important. Also, not forcing yourself to love something. I just talked about trying new foods, and I think it is important to try with an open mind, but know that there's not this one particular food that you have to eat absolutely in order to be healthy. When it comes to marketing, the superfood phenomenon, it's probably been somewhat helpful in encouraging people to try new foods, but ultimately I think it's harmful because people feel like if they don't like a particular superfood, then they're not healthy. And that's just not the case, So definitely try something with an open mind, but keep in mind, you're not going to like everything, and that's perfectly fine. And then also, I think with incorporating new foods, we've already talked about this, but creating that more mindful dining experience. But all of those sort of sensory aspects can also help with incorporating new foods because you're creating an experience. Those are some strategies that I usually tend to suggest to people who are struggling a little bit.
I do also want to note that with a lot of those, especially within the CSAs, they will give you information. I know you spend a lot of time doing this as well with new recipes and how to incorporate those. So the onus is a little bit on me as well. So I'm not saying that you're being given these things and you have no idea what to do with them. But there are other ways to do it. So I think you kind of mentioned that is like, if you don't like something boiled, try it roasted. Or if you don't like it roasted, maybe try it boiled. Kind of finding the different ways and being open to trying it a couple of different times and finding what works for you. And if you don't like it, that's totally fine. You don't have to like it.
Totally. And, another thing too, like I'll hear from people that they think that for some reason they need to eat vegetables just plain, like no seasoning, no nothing. And while, some beautiful, freshly harvested vegetables do taste absolutely wonderful, plain and unadorned, if that's not your thing, add some salt. Like I cook with salt all the time. That surprises people. It enhances the flavor though.
Yeah.
Add some olive oil. Fat carries flavor. If you know that you like salsa, but you're a little like, I don't know if I like acorn squash, put them together, see what happens. You just don't know. You don't know until you know. But yeah, all those strategies for those are specific to incorporating new foods, but there's also some strategies that are specific to receiving maybe items that you don't know, like you said, and the farms, all of the CSAs that I've experienced do include a weekly newsletter with your share. So you can think of that as like a roadmap to your share. They know what vegetables are weird to you. I mean, they've been in this game for a little bit. So the farms are not only going to include recipes for these particular produce items, but they'll also include storage tips or companion foods. And not only do the farms do this, but yeah, that's definitely something that I do a lot with my job. We have a health and wellness blog that I'll put recipes on, and I try to, address these maybe unknown vegetables. Google is absolutely your friend here, but there's also a few methods that are good on basically any vegetable. Pickling something, a quick pickle, right? So cutting up a vegetable and tossing it with some vinegar, maybe a little sugar and a little salt. and that helps preserve it just a little bit in the fridge. Roasting it, like we mentioned, you can literally roast any vegetable and it will be delicious. Just olive oil and salt is all you need, but of course you can add other things. Maybe simmering it and pureeing it to make a really simple soup with either a little bit of like heavy cream or a non-dairy alternative. Everything tastes good sauteed with garlic and onion as far as I'm concerned. Saute it in a little oil of your choice, add it to rice to make like a stir fry, or add it to pasta like I mentioned. Make a quesadilla out of it. Super simple. Eat veggies with eggs. Pretty much any vegetable tastes great with eggs. There are those universal cooking methods. And, the great thing about CSAs becoming more popular is that everyone at least knows what like kohlrabi is now.
Yeah.
People did not know that. Now they may think that they have to fear the kohlrabi, but they know that it exists, and they know that they'll likely be getting one in their share. But the other thing too, I mentioned earlier how CSAs have just changed a lot in the last few years. Most CSAs now, and particularly the ones that are in the coalition of 5 farms that we work with for that UK CSA Voucher Program, they offer some level of customization. So if you know that you just cannot abide the kohlrabi, you can make sure that it does not darken your doorstep.
Yeah, I think that's a good point as well. That might be part of where I was willing to try these things, because I also was only going to be able to eat so much, so many green beans or something. I didn't want to try and put those in every single week. And so I had to make myself choose something else so that I had a little more variety and tried something else. And so a lot of these tips that you've mentioned are things that work for me as well, and helping reduce food waste as well. And so that's kind of that second kind of brief point I want to ask about is I think you've touched on it a little bit, but are there any other ideas you have for reducing food waste, whether that's through your normal grocery shopping or if you are receiving a CSA?
I do. So I think that when you're looking to reduce food waste, the first thing to do that I would suggest is to identify what could be the root cause of that food waste. Okay, because if you sort of break it down, I think there's some different scenarios. So I'll give some different scenarios and then a solution that goes along with it. One possible scenario could be your shopping behavior, maybe like unorganized grocery shopping, or on the other sort of side of the spectrum there, over aspirational food shopping.
Been there.
Yes, I'm going to make this. And we all have, right? So I would, one solution could be make a list. Go grocery shopping with a list. Keep it on your phone. Keep a running list on your phone. Or, be old school and write it down. But it's so basic, but I cannot tell you how many times I've suggested that. And people are like, oh, yeah, I don't do that. So that's one thing. And one way that can help shape that list is to research recipes or cooking methods before you go grocery shopping. Again, very basic, but you'd be surprised with how many people don't do that. Another possible scenario that could contribute to food waste is if you have a problem with time management, or if you tend to feel more of a sense with overwhelm that's specifically related to like culinary confidence. I think that's very natural, especially if you're just sort of starting out with learning how to cook or learning how to manage a CSA. So if that's a possible scenario, definitely use that CSA newsletter. Talk to your farm, talk to your friends, see who else is getting a CSA and see what they're doing. Maybe start a group chat where you're all talking about your CSAs and what you're eating that week. That can be helpful. And then, of course, researching recipes as well. Another scenario would be this is kind of like a weird one, but check your fridge. Like if you notice that you are throwing away a lot of food, make sure that your fridge is holding proper temperature. It should be 40 degrees. Most of us, we may not have learned that in school. So that's something to keep in mind. And also there are specific ways to store food in your refrigerator that can help with food waste. If something comes to you and it's got like a twisty tie around it or a rubber band, remove that rubber band, remove that tie, because what that constriction is doing is encouraging cell breakdown, and that's inviting decay, right? So definitely remove any sort of constricting band, give the greens a floof or whatever, and store them loosely in a plastic bag in like the crisper drawer of your refrigerator. Alternatively, though, if you are someone whose refrigerator crisper drawer is like the graveyard of vegetables, which I've definitely heard that before because it's out of sight, out of mind, don't put them in the crisper drawer and store them somewhere where you'll see them when you first open up the refrigerator. So that might be, again, in a clear plastic bag or in a clear container, just, front and center, so nothing sort of disappears on you. I mentioned, restaurant workers a little bit earlier, but I do come from that restaurant background, and something that we always practice is the first in, first out method, making sure that not only do you use what's been in your refrigerator the longest first, but also when you're putting your food away, put it away in such a manner that you're putting the new stuff behind the old stuff. Again, it sounds really super basic, but a lot of people forget these items. And I think too, choosing the right size CSA is really important, and it kind of goes along with that over aspirational shopping. Maybe most farms, not all, but most farms offer multiple sizes for the season. So if you're a new CSA member, or if you're a small household, don't get the biggest share.
Mm-hmm. Definitely don't.
Don't do it. Get the mini. You can always buy more, at the farmer's market. But yeah, the mini share or the small share, those terms are usually used interchangeably. Those are great for new CSA members or for like households of 1 to 2 people. Or if you're a household of 1 who's like a plant-based diet person. The regular or large shares, those terms are used interchangeably. Those are great for members that live in a larger household of 3 to 4 people, or do a lot of food preservation. Maybe they have that culinary know-how. But yeah, start small. You can always buy more.
Yeah, I think something we're actually going to try is splitting it with somebody else as well. So we have some friends that are single that won't use an entire one themselves. Or if you're somebody who is hesitant about something like this, but you are interested at least, maybe split it with somebody else. And that way the investment's lower on you, and you're not receiving as much. You're not having to worry about incorporating as much. And that removes a little bit of that barrier for you. So splitting it can be helpful, I think. And that's something we're actually going to try with one of our friends. But yeah, I think a lot of those tips, I mean, you gave tons and tons of good tips there for saving your own money as well, because you're really, the more food you're throwing out, that's money that you've, sort of wasted. And that's not even talking about the other detriment to throwing out food like that.
Exactly. I mean, I'm a food professional, right? And I still throw out food sometimes. I mean, it's going to happen, but you want to try and, do as much as you can to kind of mitigate that practice.
I think one more point I want to make that sort of wraps a lot of that up, and this is actually something I pulled from you all related to kitchen burnout, is trying a meal delivery service. Yeah. I was sort of hesitant or resistant to that idea because I am a person who likes a little bit of control as well. So being sort of put into this bucket of I have to choose between these 10 meals or whatever was a little intimidating. But we started trying that recently as well, and just doing a really low investment one that is just like a few meals a week kind of thing. And they send you how much you need, and it's not too much, and you get to try some new things. So it kind of incorporates both the food waste and ways to incorporate some new foods as well. And you have some level of control on what you're choosing and that type of thing. And that's worked out. I think we may stick with that and then fill in the rest of our meals with some of the local things. But when choosing one, we were very thoughtful about which one we chose, and knowing that they were also trying to source as much of their food local to you as possible. That was a value that we had, and that helped us make that decision a little bit easier.
Yeah. And, even though it might feel like losing a little bit of control in the short term when you start a food delivery service relationship like that, if you think about it in the long term, you are learning maybe some new foods that you like, or you're learning new techniques that you didn't know before, and you can save the recipes,
Exactly.
and find those ingredients elsewhere. So, I absolutely support that as a method for decreasing food waste and just increasing, again, that culinary confidence. I see a lot of people that want that confidence, but they're just super stymied on how to start. And again, that goes back to, local food is cool. Cooking is cool now. So that's been pretty exciting to see that change happen.
Yeah. So for our listeners that want to dive deeper on any of these topics, what are some books, podcasts, websites, other self-guided resources you'd recommend that may add value to their lives?
Oh God, there's so many.
I knew this would be a tough one for you.
This is so hard. I mean, I will say some things that I have recommended to people in the past who are just sort of starting out with either CSAs or cooking in general. The Asparagus to Zucchini cookbook is a great sort of introduction to new CSA members because it literally goes through all of your vegetables from A to Z and gives you, culinary history, nutrition facts, storage tips, and recipes. Some of our listeners might recognize that cookbook as something that they have received from us in the past as an incentive. So if you haven't dug that book out yet, check it out. And if you don't have it, you can find it online. Another book that is fairly recent, and it's part of a new empire. If anyone has not experienced the joy that is Samin Nosrat, she is fantastic, and she has a book called Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat that I would highly recommend. There are recipes in it, but again, it's also sort of like a how-to for not only increasing your skills in the kitchen, but just like joy in food in general. And she also has a Netflix show called The Same, and she and a colleague of hers, Rishike Hirway, had a wonderful podcast that just wrapped up called Home Cooking. And you see like some of those wacky people like running and cracking up while they're running. Well, that was me listening to their podcast over the last few months. So highly recommend that. America's Test Kitchen and Milk Street Kitchen are also great resources for recipes. They have several books out with lots of different themes, but one of the great things about those is that they test every recipe within an inch of their lives. They maintain online presences, but you have to buy a subscription to the website. So if you buy a cookbook, then at least you have it there in your kitchen.
Yeah, those are a lot of good options, and we'll link to some of the other things that we mentioned in the episode in the show notes as well. So things like the Kentucky Farm Share Coalition and Kentucky Proud and Oak and those types of things that we've mentioned already. I'll also put those in the show notes so that you'll have easy access to those.
And also, too, I want to make sure that if there's anyone listening who is not eligible for our UK CSA voucher, but they're still interested in getting a CSA for themselves, one way to do that is definitely to look on the Kentucky Proud website, where there's a listing of local farms that offer CSAs, and also the national website, localharvest.org. You're able to type in your zip code and find some farms in your area that offer CSAs. So those could also be very helpful for you.
So you kind of talked a little bit about the programs and the support that you provide. So do you have anything coming up, any new programming or anything like that you'd like to share as well?
Well, yeah. So we do offer those weekly nutrition classes for eligible employees, as well as those free consults. But we've got a new thing coming up that's kind of fun. And it's mainly coming from Karen. Which is great because usually the culinary stuff falls on my side of the office, and this is something that she has been spearheading. So this is called the Lazy Dietitian, and the Lazy Dietitian comes out of the idea that dietitians can be just as lazy as anyone else when it comes to cooking dinner. Like I mentioned, I throw away some kale sometimes too, and sometimes Karen doesn't feel like cooking dinner, so So in this series, what we'll do is highlight our favorite convenience foods that are high on nutrition but really low on effort required, and also how to combine them into tasty recipes that the whole family can enjoy. So our definition of a convenience food is something that really just requires assembly and very little cooking, and I think too, with so much debate going on right now about processed foods, and maybe that processed foods are demonized just a little bit, that this might sort of clear some things up for people. So each month we're going to have a new recipe on the Health and Wellness blog, and that'll be combined with a short animated video. And hopefully those can help you assemble a quick and delicious and nutritious meal.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So final question, what's the one thing you hope listeners take away from this conversation?
Eat your vegetables. Love yourself.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
maybe that'll just be the title. Eat your vegetables and love yourself.
That's it. Good. Yeah. Yeah. And don't be afraid that you're doing it wrong. There's always going to be a learning curve for everything. But yeah, just keeping that sort of open mind and that experimenting mindset is going to go a long way.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all your knowledge with us on nutrition and CSAs and those types of things.
Thanks. I feel like, we definitely covered a lot today, but it was definitely a lot of fun.
Well, thank you so much again.
Sure thing.
That'll do it for another episode of Becoming Wildly Resilient. I hope you learned how you can connect nutrition with resilience practices, what CSAs are, and how you can incorporate more produce and variety into your diet. In addition to the CSA vouchers that are currently open to UK Health Plan members and the upcoming Lazy Dietitian series, we have a few other programs or events that are continuing or coming up that UK employees, retirees, or spouses might be interested in. As I mentioned in the last episode, the Fall in Love with Sleep Challenge is happening throughout February 2021. If you're interested in receiving free access to the Sleep Rate app to optimize your sleep, be sure to visit the link in the show notes and follow the provided instructions. Any UK employee that downloads the app and logs 7 or more nights of sleep in the month of February will be eligible to win one of 3 Fitbit wearable devices. The Wellbeing check-ins are also live for UK employees right now. Get a snapshot of your overall well-being and discuss what's next with one of these 20-minute virtual appointments. Each month, 8 participants from that month will be randomly chosen to win $200. And if you don't follow us on social media yet, be sure to find us by searching at UKY Wellness. Each Monday at 2:22 p.m. Eastern, health coach Jackie Carroll conducts a short meditation on Facebook Live. Then on Tuesdays at 2:22 p.m. Eastern, fellow health coach Amy Rodquist-Cadet joins Jackie on Facebook Live for Untangled Tuesdays. These 10 to 15-minute breaks are here to help you unwind the worry and loosen the grip of exhaustion. Finally, there will be another half-day co-room mindfulness retreat on Saturday, February 20th from 9 a.m. to noon. Visit the UK HR calendar of events to learn more and register. Until next time, take care of yourself and others, and stay well. Thanks for listening to Becoming Wildly Resilient, a podcast series from University of Kentucky Human Resources, Health and Wellness. The UK HR Health and Wellness team, consisting of certified health coaches, fitness experts, registered dietitians, and wellness specialists, offer a wide range of online and in-person programming to University of Kentucky employees, retirees, and their spouses. If you enjoyed this episode, you can listen and subscribe to future episodes wherever you find your podcasts. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram by searching at UKY Wellness. There, you'll find links to episode show notes and more. You can also email healthandwellness@uky.edu with any questions or suggestions for future episode topics. To learn more about well-being benefits offered by University of Kentucky Human Resources, visit www.uky.edu/hr/wellbeing. Live well.